Okay, so we're ready to mount some of these in the plane now. I reversed the rudder servo horn. If you remember from the first video, I had it on the wrong side because it turns out, so I put the rudder link in the plane, but then you can tell in that slot it has to be on the right side. And then I thought I had to reverse the rudder in the radio, but that turns out not to be the case. In clean flight, you always want the sliders to go to the right when the rudder goes right, or the throttle goes high, or the aileron goes right, or the pitch goes forward. So once you have that set up, you don't want to reverse that, but in the servo tab, when you reverse the checkbox, click the checkbox for reversing, that'll reverse the motion of the rudder from the radio, and then it takes care of the gyro by itself. So you never have to compensate for the gyro moving in the wrong direction. So once you have the actual servo moving in the right direction, the gyro will compensate correctly. So these are the these are the push rod holders for the servos, and obviously I'm going to have to drill these holes a little bit out. And you never want to drill the holes too large, because then you don't want this to have play, because that play is going to be evident in your movement when you're trying to move the control surfaces. So you want to drill this out just so that it's snug. In fact, if it's a little tight and then after a while working it will loosen it, that's probably ideal. These 4 screws are for, I didn't use them because I used some from a different build, but these are 4 screws are for the motor mount. And you just hold that X mount up there, pencil it in, and then drill some pilot holes, very small, much smaller than this. I had a kind of a pain getting those in there. Oh, and connecting these motor wires. The motor wires were like 5 millimeters too short, so I had to use 2 sets of pliers to try to get those together. That was not fun. And then I had to cut this little slot in the foam for some strain relief, because it was really pushing up against this, and it was just really hard to screw in the motor to that wood mount. So this helps a little bit, and it's going to be covered by the cowl anyway, so no big deal. What else? Oh, so I put in all my horns. This is the rudder horn. So for the horns, there's, let's see, 4, 2 on each wing, 1 on the elevator, and then 1 on the rudder. And there's 3 different length screws. 2 are the same length, so that's pretty easy to figure out. The short ones. The short ones, there's 4 screws, 2 on each aileron. And then there's 2 medium length ones that goes in the elevator. Then the really long ones go in the rudder, because the rudder is the thickest. And then as recommended by others, I've not only put a little skid on here to keep this off the grass. You can see there's a hinge. I just cut this and slotted a hinge, because a lot of people say when you hit the rudder landing or taking off, it's going to rip right off, so I took care of that. Also glued the bottom skid plate on with welder glue, which is this stuff. I also have this, but I haven't used this yet because that stuff it might take a while to cure. Alright, so I'm about ready to drill these holes out. I'm going to mount these. I'm going to put a little bit of thread lock on this retaining thumb screw, because I don't want that sliding off. You don't want to use too much though, because it'll eat into this plastic. And then I'm going to unscrew the grub screw here, so that I can pass the push rod through it. But not only that, I'm going to also thread lock that screw as well, because once you button this all up in there, you don't want anything to loosen up during flight. And this is something you just want to do once and not have to check too many times. Also, when I put these in, I forgot to do it on that one, but when I put these in, I'm going to put a little piece of silicone. I'm going to cut some fuel tubing real short, and that's going to keep these from falling apart once I snap them on. You can also use heat shrink for that. Just cut a tiny strip of heat shrink, put it on there, heat it up. Or don't even heat it up, just get one that's nice and small and that'll stretch and hold it like a rubber band, so that'll keep it from falling off. So I just have to determine how I'm going to mount this and this. I want to do this so that it's as far back as I can, maybe right above the servos. I might create a little shelf. And then this, I will probably try to mount somewhere just forward of that. And then hopefully I can cut some space for the battery right here, and then I'll keep all the CG towards the rear so that I can have a FPV cam and a GoPro or a Yi camera up in the front, and CG will balance. So first I'm going to install the servos, and then I'm going to dry mount everything and check CG. Also with the servos, once you've got everything mounted, the horns mounted and centered, do this after you've centered it. Put the screws in with a little bit of thread lock, because these are metal screws going into a metal gear or metal mount underneath this horn on the servo. So you're going to want to use thread lock here as well. Ideally, you should use a little Vaseline or something where this slides into, so it makes it waterproof. But I think I'm just going to go with Corrosion X, and hopefully that'll keep everything waterproof. I'm going to put it on the naves as well, and the ESCs and servos too. Hopefully it doesn't eat into the foam, so we'll see what happens. Okay, so I got all the push rod retainers. I can't remember what these are called. Anyway, the push rod retainers, I can see I scored a little Corrosion X right where the horn meets the servo. I didn't open up the servo and squirt the Corrosion X inside like they do on a flight test, because it's going to be buried in here, and I don't know if I really need it. I think if I ever fly on salt water, maybe, but just for snow, I doubt I'll need it. Fresh water, it's questionable. I'm going to have tape covering this, so I doubt water will easily get in there. But if that's ever the case, these servos aren't very expensive. I can replace them and put Corrosion X on the inside of the case. Okay, so I've got my ailerons on here. Now the aileron servo, I have some concerns. It's kind of weak to be moving two control surfaces. There's just a tiny little bit of slop, which is normally okay, but given that both ailerons are going to be a little bit, are going to have that slop, you're kind of magnifying it, you're doubling it up. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to put just a little bit of glue on either side, and then I'll put it in there, and that way, if I ever want, I can just cut it out and replace it with maybe a mini servo. I've got some GWS park size servos that have a bit more torque and a little bit larger, probably a little bit less slop, but the only thing is they're not digital, so who knows how they'll work with this flight control board. But we'll start off with this one, see how that goes. And likewise for all the other servos, I'm only going to put a little bit of glue on either side, and that way once it slides in there, if I ever want to remove it, I just have to take a knife, cut the glue on the sides, and I can pull it out. And I've had to do that before for other planes. So okay, let's yeah, I had to redo the rudder one, because the hole I drilled was a little bit too large, and this push rod retainer had a lot of slop in it. So the way I do it is I, push this through, I unscrew this, push it through, put a little bit of Loctite on that thread, and then screw it on. Don't put the Loctite on before you put it through, because then you're going to get it all over the inside of that control horn. And like I said, it'll eat away at the plastic. So. And likewise, I Loctited the grub screws, and they're drying now, but I'm going to get these rods in there soon enough, so we'll see how that goes. Okay, like I mentioned before, I cut a little strips of silicone fuel tubing, and I'm going to put it on here. I'm going to use these pliers to stretch it out, slide it over, and then eventually when I'm all done, I'm going to slide it closer to this pin, and that'll keep this from spreading open in flight. I don't know if I've ever had that happen, maybe once, but why risk it? It's such a... Okay, the elevator servo has glue on it. I pushed it in, rubbed it a little bit on the foam, and I pull it out, so letting it air dry, because this is welder glue is a contact cement, so you gotta let it dry a little bit first, and when you put it back, it should hold pretty solid. And then here's the rudder servo. I did the same thing. I put glue on it. I'm gonna slide it in there a little bit, move it around, and then pull it back out and let it dry just a little bit. And then when I push it back in, it should be good. Same with the aileron servo. Okay, so I've got everything in a relative position. I think that I'm gonna have stuff in. Oh, why does it do that? Anyway, so I threw some stuff in the front. There's no wiring, but the wiring is fairly inconsequential. I suppose I could just throw something small like this on there to make up for wiring and OSDs and stuff like that. So it's still a little tail heavy, which is good because I'm gonna put a bigger battery, and plus I've got this 2200 all the way in the back, and I really want to have it up here. So I'm gonna disconnect it, shove this 2.6 right around here and see how that balances. This is actually looking pretty good so far. I don't have the prop, I don't have the cowl. That's definitely going to add some weight. And the prop nut. So I may have to throw those things on there. But you can see the aileron. It's going right, left, elevator, and rudder. Left rudder, right rudder. I'm gonna have to figure out why it's doing that. I must have a horizon. Yeah, that's what it's gotta be. There's a horizon. I have to trim the horizon mode. I bet you that's what it is. So once I do that, that shouldn't happen. Okay, so, but yeah, you can see how everything's working, and if you move the plane, see, the gyros will counteract it, tilt up, or, I'm sorry, tilt down, and the tail wants to go up. Wow, it's starting to get heavy. Okay. Wow, that's noisy. So everything looks good. Throttle hold down and the board arms, and then of course the prop. Spins up, so it sounded pretty good. Have to check for balance later. Yeah, let's see how it balances. Okay, so here's the way it's turning out. If I fly without the FPV equipment, just the canopy, the battery comes up here. It balances pretty decently with the ESC all the way back here, which means I'm going to have to somehow make a step for it. A little platform, a couple popsicle sticks, and have this strapped above the servos, which is fine. If I use the FPV equipment and add all of this, the battery is better off sitting right here. Right here in this area. Now that works. It's just tough. It's a tough squeeze. And then for the times when I've got the battery in the front, I'm gonna have to have an extension cable. So let's see how that works. Quite perfect, except this is gonna have to sit up here. There's no room for it here. There's plenty of space right here. I'm gonna create a little platform here where I can mount the nays. That way, whether the battery's in the back or in the front, this won't be bothered. USB port will point at the front, and I can update it with firmware as I need to. The receiver will probably just be stuck to the roof or the floor in here. Perfect. So with this, the CG is not bad. It's not bad. It may even be slightly nose heavy, but one thing we have to remember is I don't have a prop on here or a prop nut, and that does add a little bit of weight. So that should probably offset this going all the way up here to the front. It'll be pretty close. It'll be mostly a wash. But that means I can run a Yi or a GoPro way up front because I don't want to stick it back here like some people do and see the whole plane. I just prefer to be at the front. So I do have a little bit of work, but it's a good solution. I think it'll work. Alright. And it's 2 a.m. Time to go to bed. Okay, so I had a heck of a time mounting these wings. One side goes in real easy because you can get your hand on the other side to push it. I mean, even just dry fitting, it's super, super tight. You could almost just leave it in without the glue, but of course it's going to fall out, and the glue stiffens it up, so you obviously have to glue it. So, but there's no other choice. But the problem is, by the time you get to the other side, with the glue I was using, the contact cement, by the time you glue the top, the bottom, and the inside, by the time you get to like the bottom of this, one side's already drying. So I tried to shove it in, and it just stuck. I could not get it more than about a third of the way in, and it just would not go in. And now you can't push on the other side. So I ended up ripping it all out, which tore a little bit of the foam, and then I just could not get it in there. So what I actually ended up doing is taking it off, tapering the foam so it goes in perfectly flat. But what I did is I tapered it on the top, the bottom, and just the edges, so it would be easier to slide in. But even then, I mean, you can see the marks where I had to actually take a knife and cut it so that the glue would separate because it was drying so fast. I just could not get it in there quick enough or hard enough. I mean, it's just the tolerances are so tight. And finally I figured out that the best way to do it was to hold it up, put this stupid nose between my knees, grab on, I mean, the foam here is a little dented from me pushing so hard. So I would recommend not putting glue on the wing, but instead putting the glue on the inside, near the end, all the way in. And then on the wing, putting the glue as far out. That way, when you first start pushing it in, you know, the farthest inside section of the wing isn't touching glue till it gets almost all the way on the inside. And then the glue that's on the edge of the wing will make contact with the outside edge of the foam on the fuselage. If I did it again, that's the way I would do it on this side. On one side it's easier, on this side it's very difficult because you just don't have any leverage. So yeah, I kind of messed up the foam a little bit, but that's okay. And then one other mistake I made, which I didn't realize until it was too late, I started doing it, was this carbon spar right here. Let's see, this one, it's at a slight crooked angle because I had to redo it on the fly. Originally it's supposed to, there's a hole right here, it's supposed to go here, right around here. The problem is, as soon as I started putting that wing in, with the glue by the way, I saw that the battery won't be able to slide in there. So I moved it after I ripped the wing out, I ripped the carbon out, and then I just took a skewer, a barbecue skewer, a metal one for like, you know, shish kebabs and whatever, and I poked a hole in each wing, eyeballed it, and then glued the carbon, and that's where I went. So that's the new location, right in front of the popsicle sticks. So it's, you know, I wanted to reinforce it. There's one carbon spar way up here, but I wanted the second one, but I had to move it from here to here as the glue was quickly drying. So, and here's the popsicle sticks I made. I cut the corners on them, and then I just angled it in there and then shoved it, and it cut the foam a little bit, but that's okay. I just shoved some glue in there. So this ESC is going to sit right here. I'm going to zip tie the wires, and I've test fit the cover, and it fits and everything, so it looks like there's just enough room for a 2200 milliamp battery, and then that balances pretty well with all the FPV equipment up front. Note that I made the popsicle sticks, put them in such a position so that I can actually unscrew the servo horns on the servos, and I can get to the grub screws for the control rods and everything. So make sure the popsicle sticks aren't in the way, and also make sure there's enough of a gap so that all these control rods can move freely. So that was the adventure last night. Oh, I'm sorry, actually it was earlier this afternoon. I was sweating bullets trying to pull that wing apart. Okay, so it's about ready. I've got the 12 volt power source adjustable. Got the nays, and then you can see that I used the what do you call it, that the 3M dual channel lock, the dual lock I guess it's called, and it's pretty strong. I mean, if you take your finger and move it, the nays will move, but by itself it's fairly solidly mounted. And once I calibrated it, I put something on the nose. I put a couple batteries in the nose, let it sit, and calibrated the nays. And then when I put in the horizon mode, the ailerons are perfectly flat now, where last night they were kind of at a weird angle. So that seems to do the trick. So I've got my OSD in here. I just need to rewire this so that the camera gets power, and then this is the 12 volts, so that I'm going to do 12 volt to the VTX, 12 volts out of the VTX, and then power the FPV cam. I think I have a set of wires somewhere, I just have to find them. So that should be it, just about ready to go. The other thing I have to do is somehow mount the FPV camera and the Yi to this pod. I have not figured that out yet. As it is, it sits pretty low, and you're going to see a lot of this nose. So I'm going to redo it so it sits a little bit higher. I don't want to see this too much.